So my takeout from the first section is that if I stand here, I just look like a talking head to you guys here. I felt maybe a bit like Basil Brush or Max Headroom. If I pace, I'll fall over, or you'll see my knees knocking, and also there's tables and things in the way. So I'm going to try and kind of put bits of me out. So you can see I'm a real person, not just a talking head here. So I'm taking you through our study that we've done in terms of ROI modelling. So we've been looking at mining our results vault, which has all of our market mix models from brand science work across the years and across different countries. We're focusing in on 500 cases that are running over the last 5 years. So we are talking about a meta-analysis. So what meta-analysis is looking at results across those multiple different studies, and we want to have as many of those as possible. So we're trying to answer 3 key questions here. We're trying to look at how effective are campaigns that use print news brands versus those that do not. We're focusing in very much on this study on print news brands. We have done some work about cross-referencing versus digital news brand usage as well. We don't have time to show you that today. I have to come back. Second one, what impact do print news brands have on the effectiveness of other media channels? So looking at particularly those synergies. We've seen some of that work before this seminar. And then what proportion of the budget should be spent on print news brands to deliver optimum level of campaign ROI? So using the channel planning tools that we've built off of the results vault, I'm sure that's proper English, to be able to show exactly what the right element should be for an average campaign. Obviously, every campaign is different, the content is different, but it gives our planners a start point to be able to say this is what a good mix would be. So, evidence. Number 1 is that print news brands are boosting overall campaign ROI by 3 times on average. Everything differs by category, and so one of the things that we've done in this, which is why I'm going to keep you here for the next hour and 15 minutes, is that we have well, I'm not, it's only going to be 30 minutes, we've trimmed the campaign down, but there's loads of stuff that's going to be available on the microsite. So 3 times on average, it varies by category. Print news brands make TV twice as effective and online display 4 times as effective, looking at those ROIs versus the use of news brands. And then finally, print spend on news brands should really be returning to 2013 levels and can be boosted further by adding in those digital news brands by looking at the extra analysis that we've done on that part. So we've gone across 6 different categories. Most of them are service categories, but we thought we should absolutely add in some goods categories, and we've done an analysis of FMCG as well. So we've got data that's useful for multiple different applications. Combined services obviously includes retail, finance, automotive, travel and transport, but it will include other things such as entertainment and leisure and things like funeral directors and flower shops. No, that's retail. And we're going to focus on 4, and that there's going to be some scant detail on each of those. As I say, the microsite is going to have much more detail in there for you. First of all, we wanted to look back at what has actually happened in terms of ad spend on news brands. We know that news brands are being spent less now, but how has it changed? How has the scene in the UK actually changed? And to do this, we use a new data source that we have access to, Standard Media Index, which is actual media spend from media agency booking data provided by 65% of the UK agencies. We have data on this similarly for other countries in the world. It's data across all above line media. So for the first time, we can see what is a normal search representation in a category, which we cannot get from any other source. And we get a sensible level of what is a reasonable online display spend as well from this data source. We can break down that digital spend across display, video, paid search. We can break it down other ways into ad networks versus others, etc. And we can break down for the first time news brand spend across print, and we can isolate digital news brands too. So that's exciting just to find that out. And then we have this motif is a pendulum. I keep saying the pendulum should be bigger. It's not going to swing that fast unless the pendulum is heavier, but that's physics, not mathematics. So across all of the categories that we're looking at within SMI, total news brand spend has declined since 2011, and it has declined from 15.4 to just under 10%, 9.7%. So first of all, from some of the digital propaganda that you hear, you kind of think, well, actually, I thought it might be worse, but it's not. That's the case. It dropped by just over a third. It does vary by category. If you look at the split across different channels, then this is the situation in the total year 2015. On the microsite, I think we're also putting on first half of 2016, but it's not, because first halves are always different from second halves, it's not fair to show that for this picture. It does show actually a slight recovery for news brands in some sectors. So digital channels are accounting for 31.6% of the mix. That 9.7 I showed you for news brands is there as print news brands plus the online news brands at 2.1%. And then you can see, as we all know, that TV is the majority medium, but you can see here that we have a situation that with the fall that we've seen, that print news brands are essentially the third offline medium now. They were the second back in time. Here we go. I think there should be a sound effect here. So we've seen that all across the categories, the print news brand spend has declined since 2011. That's gone down from 13.7 to 7.6. Now, you've got to be not colourblind to see this. Purple means retail. In retail, print news brands actually still are the number 2 channel. It's the only sector across the ones we've analysed where print is still number 2. Generally, it's display or search is coming in as number 2 to TV in most categories. So you can see here that there has been a significant decline, not quite half in retail, but print news brands are still number 2. Here we are in automotive, where we can see the decline is much harder. This is a category where there's a belief amongst planners that digital is absolutely everything, and so that's why we've taken a real hit in terms of news brands. And then in finance, we can see the spend declining less sharply. Here there's absolutely still spend on news brands to explain that detail, to have all of that small print at the bottom that you need to have, etc., etc. I'll do the sound effect on the next one. So essentially what we're saying is, has that pendulum swung too far? Has that decline, is that decline actually warranted? So the exploration that we've done is about analysing market mix models, and any market mix model that we build has lots of different components in it. So it will look at pricing, it will look at competitors, it will look at product changes, as well as advertising by medium and by message. And essentially what we're doing with those different elements is to combine them all and make a cake with a cherry on top. Very pretty. So what we're doing is building a model that decomposes. This is a kind of made-up model where it shows all the different elements that are driving sales. And you can see the different media channels having different effects over time and also of different levels. As soon as we have got this information out of our market mix models, we can then calculate a revenue return on investment, which is the coloured area divided by the spend behind that coloured area. And that's the number that we store into our results vault to be able to compare across categories, across brands, across campaigns. So what we'll particularly do is from that previous chart, for instance, we got the sales due to the spend, which was the coloured areas that you saw. We know what the spend was. So for these individual different channels, we can then very simply calculate a revenue return on investment. We can then go further to our clients, multiply that by the margin and get to a profit ROI. If that profit ROI is bigger than 1, then we have payback. If it's not, we don't. And then you can start to think about building in longer term effects on top of that. These are generally short term effects up to about 6 months. That was the market mix modelling lesson. Not too scary, I hope. So then what we have is hundreds of different market mix models, and we're starting to analyse across those to see what's the same and then what's different. And this is meta-analysis. If we find that consistently that one channel works better than other channels, then we can start to say, okay, that's a rule. If it's different, we can start to say, why is it different? Were the weights different? Was the brand different, etc.? So what we do is that within our meta-analysis, we start by doing loads of scatter plots. So here is an example scatter plot. It's not a real one. If it was, we'd have this one like a dream, because what this is looking at is, for instance, a revenue ROI that we've got from the market mix model against the print news brand's percentage of the total media spend. And each of those dots is a market mix model that we have evaluated, a campaign that's been evaluated. And then what we've done, we've actually done it very simply with Excel, is to plot a line through those points, which is coming at us a slightly strange, heading off into the stratosphere type line, very tight fit. And what that line is suggesting, what the pattern is suggesting, is as the percentage of print news brands increases, then so does effectiveness. Yay, but we can't have this one because we made it up. What we actually do, because those dots start to get slightly mesmerising at a certain point, is that we create tertile groups of cases. So what we've done is take exactly the same points and divided them into 3 by dividing it into cases along the x-axis, and then reported those tertiles in terms of low, medium and high percentage of media spend. And that's the sort of charts that I'm going to be presenting to you. So first of all, how effective are campaigns that use print news brands versus those that do not? Looking at retail first, here we've got 3 tertiles in the middle, and then we've got another sector, which is those retail brands that are not using print news brand spend. That's the one on the left. What we've also put onto this is where the spend levels are generally in retail in 2015. So in this one, they are in the low quadrant. You have to keep your eye on what the labels are in terms of low, medium, high, because they vary by category. So first of all, the immediate thing that we can see is that it's always better to put print into the mix, whether it's low, medium or high, but actually it's best to put it into the medium area. So that 2.8 times is taking 25.18 and dividing it by 9.08. That's how we get to that number over on the left. So essentially what we're saying is that overall, on average, retailers are spending in the low category, and they could get more ROI by spending on print news brands to a slightly higher amount. This is looking at the same thing for automotive. So here we can see that the no print news brand spend is always better to spend on print news brands, but actually you'll get a much higher increase in terms of ROI if you're spending in that medium category. I like this chart because actually it says spend in the medium category, but don't go too high. The world has changed so that digital is really important for automotive. Spend between 3 and 10%, and we are spending between 3 and 10% on average in the UK. And the same picture for finance. So here we can see that it's always much better to spend in terms of print news brands. Those figures are all much bigger than that £1.49 of those brands who are not spending on print. And we are spending in terms of the best category is set between 7 and 22%, and we're just into that in terms of 2015 spending. So that's the first section. Second section, what impact do print news brands have on the effectiveness of other media channels? We've been looking at total campaign effectiveness so far. Now let's look at just the synergy effect between different channels. We're going to look at TV, online, which we've looked at from other perspectives as well this morning, and then also radio, which came in as a surprise to us. So first of all, we are looking at the same picture. We're now looking at TV ROI as the metric that we're analysing. So what we're seeing here is that for total services, it is much better to spend a medium amount of print news brand spend, so over 10%, and then your TV revenue ROI will get significantly higher, twice as high. Again, best to be spending in that 10 to 12% area. This is looking at the online ROI. So again, what we can see is that it's better to spend some money in terms of news brands. And it suggests in terms of this that you'll get very much higher returns when you're looking at a very high area. When we're looking at combined services, we get a bigger sample, but actually when you're starting to look at this chart, I know that, for instance, that 55.98 has got very many more grocery retailers in it than, for instance, things like the no print news brand spend has. So sometimes it's better to look at the absolute detail in terms of categories to be able to look at that. Grocery ROIs are typically over 50, whereas other types of services might be around the 10 or the 5s. And so I think we are exaggerating that high level. But even if you look just at the low and the medium, you can see it's always better for online to be spending in terms of print news brands. Now we're looking at a category within this, and this comes up that's saying it's always better to spend on print news brands. It's a pattern that's coming out, that these analyses, just when we pulled them out, I think that's great. We've got this. We were writing the titles as we were looking at the chart. It's always better to spend on print news brands. It's always better. It just came out with a consistent finding. We call this the NWF test. Nice warm feeling. So when you get this consistency of coming out with different sizes of uplifts, it's very much more robust in terms of our viewpoints. So yes, in terms of finance, we can see the same picture, that actually it's always better to spend on print news brands, potentially between, all of them are better, but maybe particularly in the low and medium areas. Now we are looking at radio ROI. And so this was a surprise to me. We were looking across all of our different other channels, and we could see that radio ROI was also benefiting from news brand spend. Why I thought it wouldn't, I haven't quite worked out. And actually, we don't see this pattern coming for out of home, which I think it is more difficult to consume out of home and news brand simultaneously, unless you're sitting at a tube station with a Metro newspaper. But most people in the UK aren't doing that. So yes, we can see a very strong effect here. And then we drilled that one into finance too, and we could see generally that actually print news brands were boosting radio revenue by up to 1.9 times in this finance category, with the medium category being exactly the right category to go for, the sweet spot. So on to kind of killer question: what proportion of the budget should be spent on print news brands to deliver the optimal total campaign ROI? So this is where we have done a big piece of analysis across our results vault to not just report average ROIs, but to build response curves for individual media channels. So this is an example for a particular category where we can start to see those response curves, and you can start to then optimize theoretically from this, as well as say, okay, let's set theoretical minimum and maximum levels for individual channels. No, you can't spend £80 million on cinema over a year, etc., to be able to do this. The problem with these lines conceptually for me is that some of them should be dotted at areas that we don't know. We're inferring that they kick over and then stay flat. For instance, you'll see the channels at the bottom. Others, like the TV curve that you can see going through the data, we do have the whole range of that TV curve. but there's always limits that you want to do. You don't just use these in isolation. You add on planners' insights. You add on mandatories from your client that we have a Sonic logo, therefore we can't use this particular channel, etc. So we take that and we run different scenarios at different levels of spend. And so here we're looking at annual budgets for retail, because it's purple. So what we can see here is the results that come out when we look at, in fact, this is retail supermarkets, which are behaving slightly different from other retailers. So if you're spending only £5 million as a retailer, a UK retailer across the year, then you shouldn't be using print for an optimum ROI. If as soon as you are spending money, then you should be spending significant amounts. And when you're spending around the average for a retailer, which is about 40 million, supermarket retailer, then we're saying 27%. If you are someone like an Asda or a Tesco, you're up at the £80 million, and you should be up in the 20%, at about 20%. So essentially what we are saying is with our analysis is that we've got a typical spend of about 40 million for retail supermarkets. The print news brand spend in 2015 is 16.5%, and actually it should be up to 27%. If you were to say 80 million for a biggie, then we would be saying it should be up at about 20%. Let's look at finance the same way. So what we're saying here is if you're a small finance brand, then you should be spending significant amounts of your money in print. As you become a huge finance brand, such as one of the big banks, that's when you have less. You should be putting less spend on print and more into other multimedia campaigns. But you should be still including print and at over 10%. Finance. We have skyscrapers here and they don't move, unlike supermarket baskets. So the typical spend for a finance brand is about 25 million per year. In 2015, print news brand spend was down to 8%, and it should be at 21%. Then automotive. And you can see here that the shape is very much flatter. If you're spending small amounts, then you should be spending 18%, just shy of 20%. If you are spending in the middle, it's just down to 10%. But interestingly, as you spend more, then it starts to kick up again very slowly. So we should always be spending in double digits in terms of automotive. I was expecting the car to move, but no, it's not. So here, automotive, the typical spend is about 20 million. Print news brand spend in 2015 is 8%, and we are seeing that, according to our analysis, it should be up at 11%. So we're not talking about huge shifts, but we are talking about a shift upwards, a shift back to times when print was being used at the correct weight. So we are saying, yes, the pendulum has swung too far for print. It's gone down significantly. It should be going back up to those levels that we've seen in 2013. And we have seen some signs of print increasing slightly in the first half of 2016. Our data is going to May. I think June has been an interesting month for print overall. And then we should be seeing some extra money being put back into print, and our analysis that we've got that we've got access to can say where that comes out of, and actually where it comes out of is generally digital, where when you look at the combination of search and online display, particularly, that's been the thing that has grown, and actually it's grown a bit too much. So our evidence is that, first of all, print news brands are boosting the overall campaign ROI by 3 times on average. It ranges from about 1.4 in FMCG up to 7, I think, in finance. Then print news brands are making TV twice as effective and online display up to 4 times as effective. So it's a really synergistic brand in terms of the overall campaign mix. And then what we're saying as a result of that analysis using those response curves, that the spend on print news brands should really return back to levels of a couple of years ago, 2013 levels, not the heady days of 2011. The world has changed. There is a role for digital, but we can also boost that ROI further by integrating additional digital news brands. So we did do another piece of analysis, cross-tabbing our ROIs with our results file, looking and coding each of those campaigns into how much digital news brands were being used, and then analysing across that. And that came up with a further uplift when you do use significant amounts of digital news brands. It was hard to find campaigns that didn't use digital news brands because digital news brands, the platforms, are just the big platforms with good reach and good content. So this is why we get to the snazzy line that you've got on your bags. I'm hoping we get a bag too. That says you can boost your campaign ROI by 3 times on average by including the right level of print news brands in the mix. So we're very happy that this analysis has come out with a really robust type of analysis, and there's loads more information on the microsite if you can cope with all of my bar charts. Thank you.
So we're going to have a panel session in a moment, but before we do that, I just wonder if anybody's got any questions for Sally.
Hi, my name's Wendy. I'm from News UK. It's a real basic question.
I like those, that's good.
When we're talking about news brands, and obviously Newsworks here looks after national titles, when you're looking at news brands, were you looking at all newsprint titles, or was it just the national?
It is all newspaper advertising. It will exclude, it's display advertising, not classified advertising though. So it's what's coded into the databases, essentially, into the Nielsen's and such like.
So it includes things like your regionals and your locals,
yes,
and stuff like that as well, so it's a general press. Thank you.
I like that question. Can we have no more, no more complicated ones?
Any other questions for Sally? One, no, 2 there, yeah.
Hi, it's Azoda from The Telegraph. I was wondering whether you looked at content marketing effectiveness. And the second question, when you're saying online campaigns, do you make differentiation in how the campaigns are planned and targeted? In other words, you know, sort of your big data targeted campaigns, the likes of Facebook and Google, versus just kind of ordinarily bought campaigns through ad networks and ad exchange? Thank you.
It's a really good question, and we look at our results vault where we've hard-coded columns in terms of by main media channel, and then we've started to divide up our online display into video and then search into branded versus generic. We haven't got extra columns for content marketing and then, for instance, programmatically traded digital in there. And it would be such a pain to go back and have to recode it. We absolutely, for going forward, we need to start to put that in. But one of the things that we've done, and this is what we did with the digital news brands, is that we go back through our UK study and we recode, add on extra columns that says, well, this is how much was digital news brands based on us looking up that particular example brand in the SMI data that we've got access to going back 6 years now. So if we can pick it up in SMI data, we can do an analysis of it, but I don't think that it doesn't cover everything, and some of their labels are very confusing, but potentially we might be able to look at some of that. And the alternative is to go back to the original plans and try and work it out. And I don't want to do that.
one of the things that we have done in this, we focused very much obviously on print news brands, and that's because actually digital news brands are not generally coded as a separate channel in an econometric model, or they're part of, and I think wrongly so, this amorphous mass that is online display. So one of the follow-up pieces of work that we're going to do with Sally is to go into some detail on some cases and model digital news brands as a separate channel for the first time. So Sally has talked about the fact that she coded all the cases for whether they had digital news brand spend or not, so we can look at how including that boosts print news brand ROI, but we haven't done it nobody's modelled it as a separate channel at this stage, but that's something that's going to be coming. And there's also some further work on kind of brand effects and stuff that we're going to do with Sally. So this is, Ruth said at the start of the morning, that this is a journey. It's definitely the start of a journey. There's much more to come, and much more on the website, and much more to come. Any other questions for Sally?
Hi, Tessa, M2M, and it's an easy question, don't worry.
Thanks.
Does your research cover other categories, and more specifically the charity sector?
No, yes,
No,
it
okay.
does cover other categories, but in the charity sector, we don't have enough cases where we've built econometric models. We have some, but not enough. You kind of need, for this sort of meta-analysis, where you're dividing it into tertiles, and then that fourth element of no print, we just haven't got enough to be able to split it down. I'm kind of saying that you probably need at least 40 cases in a category, and I think we've got 6, so it's a while to wait. However, you're M2M, you're part of OMG, so we can share with you our average findings for the 6 that we have got, happily.
Okay. All right, any other burning questions before we move on to our panel? Okay. Thank you very much, Sally.